There are drawbacks to being the last speaker. Uh, the previous speakers raised the bar very high. Plus, I also realized that I'm standing between you and the parting this evening. So, it's a bit difficult to think about topics in such events. So I decided to cover a pet peeve of mine. The distinction between innovation and the process that takes place behind innovation. In popular understanding, psyche, it is commonly understood that innovation has to do with technology. It has to do with a particular genius, more often than not a man, that sits around, thinks up, that we consumers lap up, and then cannot understand our life without it. Not only that, but invention is understood as the primary drive of society. Innovators have become high priests of society. How then do we understand, or what do we make of the fact that some of the biggest innovators of the past 200 years do not have a background in technology? Thomas Edison, Elon Musk, Steve Jobs. They managed companies connected to technology, but they didn't go to technology schools, they were not coders. I came to understand that innovation is not something that happens out of thin air. It's not an epiphany. It's not a eureka moment. It's not a proverbial apple falling from the tree on top of somebody's head, and they start thinking, I got it. It may be a series of such moments, but it's generally a process. In order to understand this a bit better, perhaps it's worth going through a bit of background. This trajectory describes the various stages through which technological innovation happens. In the early stage, what we commonly understand as disruptive innovation or revolutionary, transformational innovation, this is where we try to figure out solutions, new solutions to existing problems. Things that have not existed before, in other words. This is where there are very few adopters, there are the pioneers, and there are probably different approaches to the same solution or to the same problem. Think of it as the automobile market 130, 140 years ago. Were you to ask the average person on the street at that time about a better possible means of transportation, to quote Henry Ford, they would have said they wanted a better horse, a quicker horse. And all of a sudden you get cars. Not just cars, but cars that were relying on different technologies. In the early 20th century, in America, there were just as many cars on internal combustion engines as there were on electrical engines. Yet, after all the struggle, only the internal combustion engine emerged as the winner. On the basis of which we went into the incremental innovation stage, where people started to do simple fine-tuning. You added air conditioning, you add a sound system, you add airbags, and so on and so forth. Finally, getting to a stage where basically everything is commoditized. A car is a car is a car. And you have to figure out how to differentiate yourself from the rest of the competition. Throughout these stages, the meaning of innovation, the way that you differentiate yourself is different. The processes that take place in order to get to the innovation itself are different. So for me, innovation takes place at that particular area where technical invention meets commercialization. It's a bad word, I don't like it. I haven't managed to figure out a better one yet. Let's take a look at the invention part. It has to be useful for it to stand a chance, right? I personally tend to think that that big picture on the left-hand side of the presentation would make a great romantic present for St. Valentine's. As you could expect, my wife thinks I'm an idiot. Now, more relevant and pertinent to this discussion is the picture on the right-hand corner, the car. As I mentioned earlier, there were competing models in the early 20th century. Why the internal combustion engine succeeded? That was because the oil industry had a particular interest to push forward this particular model. There was not sufficiently developed battery industry. And the electrical industry were basically busy electrifying the country for industrial goals. There was a confluence of factors, in other words, and of people that brought about the internal combustion engine emerging as the winner out of this whole process of competition. Which is a good segue to the commercialization stage, which is what makes the difference between a workable technology and solution and a successful product and company. Facebook is actually a good example because nothing that they used in the beginning was revolutionary. The technology existed. Social networks existed before this company. You can't convince me that the advent of the like button made the difference. But it was a confluence of events. A few things that they did right, and a few things that they managed to convince other people that they do right. In essence, it takes bringing on board a huge number of stakeholders to make a technological invention a successful innovation. You've got to have the technology. It's a condition precedent. It's a necessary precondition, but it is not sufficient. You have to convince the users that what you're offering is useful. It makes a difference in their lives. You have to convince banks and investors to give you money in order to produce and to deliver what you have in mind. You have to convince the government and the regulators that your product and your service are actually net a plus to society. You have to convince other people that could find a way to complement your product, be that advertisers or other people in a supply chain that you're forming. All of this takes a particular skill, and it's not technological. It's a skill that has to do with communication. It has to do with convincing people. It has to do with selling something. It is about politics. If you're going out to do a revolution, especially in that stage of disruptive innovation, then you have to contend with all of these parties. You have to contend with competition, adversaries, or even enemies. I learned to call this particular skill systems builders. People that tend to bring about a whole ecosystem around the products or service that you have invented. hence the fact why Thomas Edison, Elon Musk, Steve Jobs are the true innovators, not the people that invented the products behind them. So if Apple is going to be the technical invention falling from the tree, it really doesn't fall by itself. You have to shake it. The more revolutionary the product or the service, the more you have shaking you need to do. As you browse through those examples, I'd like to just show you this particular phone. When it came out in the market 20 years ago, all the technology was already there. There was nothing particular about this sort of phone. It was the way that they brought it together. Not just user interface, but the system that they put together around this product that made the difference and has made it by far the most successful product that the company has today. And by far the leading product in its category. Or this company. It became synonymous with a wide range of products and services. People started emulating what they do. People started comparing themselves to what they do. And the success followed, despite the more recent troubles, which I think are part of the process of innovation. They continue to be a success story. So I ask you, what is their particular innovation? Is it the technology? No, it's something that everybody else has or can have. Is it because they found a market, customers that previously did not exist? That's not true either. Or market positioning? Not really. It's the business model that made the difference for this company. Airbnb, the same thing. They offered a new solution in a particular existing market. These companies succeed by being system builders, by convincing people that there is a different way in which you can do things. As you go out of school and start your careers, you want to think about how do you do and how do you make the difference in the life of the companies in which you contribute or start. Technical skill and knowledge has its own place in society, but the true innovators are these people. Thank you.